thank you very much for having me. I work for Arup. My colleague is here too, just to see if there's any follow-ups. Arup, I don't know, you might have heard of as a firm. We are too many. We are a global consulting and advisory firm. About 15,000 people, about 1.2 billion turnover, and all our activities are in the built environment. We exclusively focus on that. We are owned by employees, a combination of employees and our trust, which the founder created to protect the sort of independence of the firm, which at one level is great because nobody's telling us what to do. We have no debt, we have no borrowings, we have no shareholders, we have no external interests. Sometimes it feels a bit scary because nobody tells us what to do. We have no external interests, we have no shareholders.
Do you have a board?
We have a board. We started to bring in some non-executive advisors so they can feel scared a bit more. London Business School, that used to do all our leadership training, they put it quite well. They said the good news is that you guys are responsible for your strategy. The bad news is that if you get it wrong, you won't exist in the future and you will have spoiled what the company has created over so many years. And there's nobody else to blame. So, yeah. But what we like as consultants is a good brief. And when I got the invitation, I thought, oh, this is great. You looked at our work, delivering smart cities, governing cities in a digital age, one of our recent reports, form part of a project to create sustainable cities and transport and a digital vision, an enthusiastic and expert audience, that's you guys by the way, so that is in the brief too, so we will hold you accountable to that.
Listen to that.
When I then turn to the second page, which I should have done, but as some of you might not reach the bottom of the emails, I usually don't when they're too long. It also talked about the previous speakers. I was thinking, oh my God, you had some proper speakers here too. So, but it is in our sweet spot of research and what we've done. So let me get to it, and then I think there is time for questions and discussions at the end. One of my team put some slides together. They came up with this, and I really liked it. Technology changes cities, technology changes. And actually, this, I think, is part of the challenge. So in Arup, I'm leading our client-facing technology or digital activities. And one of the challenges we have is that it's never stable. You know, you want to get to this point at some point where you say, right, this is the technology we're going to use. When I talk to my highways colleagues, there's a slightly different level of innovation and rate of change in the materials we use in building roads. Or when we design a bridge, like stonecutters in China, it's a 15-year project. You know, I've been in Arup for over 20 years, and a couple of my colleagues have been there longer. They worked on 3 projects in their entire career in Arup's. In technology, that is like, I think we work in cat years in a way. You know, we have innovation cycles now between 3 and 5 years. So cities don't just have to prepare for the changes they face as a city, they also have to do that now with an ever-changing asset around digital technologies, which they don't fully understand yet in whatever is best today, never mind what will be great in 3 or 5 years' time. And in that context, I'd like to do a first survey of my highly qualified audience. Who's using a smartphone in the room? So that's the majority. Who's intending to return that smartphone and replace it with a fixed phone on their desk or Nokia phone in the next 3 to 5 years? Not many. Who has got any other sort of technology now in their lives that either them or their children will find absolutely critical to even organize the most basic tasks in their life? Who thinks there will be less of that in the future? So it's not going to go away. Yeah? I'll come back to that later. I think the acceptance that technology now is here to stay and has reached not just the business use, but the day-to-day life of citizens is a fact, and no longer the debate itself. So everything I'll be talking about is on that premise, on that assumption, that we will have more technology, not less, that will reach deeper into our personal lives, not less, and that people will want to use it to make money or drive efficiencies or benefit from that more, not less. And I'm sure we could have a debate about that too, but as a firm, that is what we assumed in our work. Now, with regard to cities, this is not really how it used to be. Our first report that we did, our main piece of research was in 2010 with the city of Melbourne. And we did that, I said over lunch, we did it originally, I think, because we did all sorts of intelligent buildings, digital campuses, ICT this and that, and we felt there was like something missing. And we wanted to move it to a higher agenda. We also liked the idea of doing a workshop in Melbourne, which is a great place to visit. And we found a sponsor in our board to pay for it, so we all went to Melbourne and did this report. But what was clear is we identified a lot of stuff people like to do, yeah? Bus stops and new signage and wayfinding and climate change stuff, but nobody could really pin down the value, the outcomes, the sort of tangible impact this technology would have for the city and what the role of the city should be to make it happen. But it triggered a research program we started with some partners that led to a piece called Information Marketplaces, which we call the digital economy of cities, where for the first time we didn't want to start with technology, but we started with policy outcomes and whether we could see a correlation between those and technology and technology trends at a city scale. And that was successful for us because it sort of, so these are reports we fund ourselves because we just want to have a view as Arup of what's happening. That then led to a whole raft of research that was sponsored by the UK government or industry, or most recently the Danish government. And what we saw during that period, that somewhere between 2013 and 14, two things started to change. The first was the acceptance of my point about your mobile phones, that this thing wasn't going to go away, and putting your head in the sand and not having a framework was difficult to justify to industry, to citizens, to academia, and cities started to get nervous that their leaders were called into meetings and saying, so what are you going to do about this? Or should you do something about this? And they didn't know what to say. And the answer was, we are doing broadband. So there was a need here that changed. The second one was technology reached another level of maturity around social, mobile, analytics and cloud technologies that people started to understand and wanted to use in cities. And the third was that the outcomes got clearer. So these reports are about export opportunities. So the UK government figured out that if they can make 3 or 4 UK cities world leaders in their use of digital technology, there's a 40 billion export market they could sell to by being leaders at home. Yeah? And then this was a transport study which started to identify there clearly are correlations between congestion management, modal shift, that require technology as an enabler, as a catalyst for that. So both high-level policy outcomes and more tactical outcomes became clearer. The second bit was these were cities that we worked with at the same time, and they followed almost the same timeline in going from I need to have a marketing report, I need to have something I can show that I have a view of some kind, and from there move towards actually this is what I want to be. Yeah? So, and that is quite interesting. So Sydney or Canberra are equally on there. We actually haven't got a good one because it's so different. Tshwane in South Africa all started to look at this issue and said, actually we want to go from talk to specific outcomes and policy frameworks leading this debate. And the only difference was that the context drove the policy framework, as you would expect. So in Tshwane, creating a formal economy and providing basic safety and sanitation were big policy drivers linked to housing, transport, and economic development activities, which is very different from Bristol, whose campaign slogan is social innovation the Bristol way. So they say we already have an amazing environment, but we need to retain people coming out of our universities, and we see it part of that policy framework. Yeah. And anyway, so they all have a different context in which they operate. And as I said before, social mobile analytics and cloud technologies were one driver, and we already see the next wave of robotics, artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, and what I call more data being available now at industrial scale that they can be used. And this technology basically is driving innovation in front of it, which I think you cannot escape from. We also started to see what a smart city isn't, or shouldn't be, and we don't think it is this. You know, this idea of the techno-utopian future, where you wake up in the morning and your fridge tells you, so your mirror in the bathroom tells you you're already late for an appointment. You know, I've got my PA is quite good. Well, she thinks she's quite good. Because she now texts me, because she realised at some point I stopped reading my emails, because when you have 460 unanswered emails, it's sort of pointless in a way. So she now texts me and says, you need to look at your email your chairman has written to you. So there is a view of technology being always good and always beneficial, and technology companies have created something, I think, around control rooms that was and home experiences that look much more like a Minority Report type future, which I don't think citizens actually want. And in our research, we haven't found any citizen asking for that. You know, if you see some of the marketing videos of industry, I don't know, I mean, you haven't seen my house, and I haven't seen yours, but my children are not that perfect, unfortunately. The apples are not as shiny, the table surfaces are not as clean. So if I had a kitchen table that talks to me, I would struggle finding that, because it's usually covered in homework that is late and stuff that my twins have left there. So I think there's an issue around how we projected the digital economy and the technology. And this is what we've done in Scandinavia. And what we came from was it needs some of this. The idea of a humane city that is actually respecting privacy, where the citizen is at the heart, where livability is part of it, and I think the digital movement has gone too far away from that. There's a project in Denmark actually called Vinge, which is worth looking at. They've done a digital master plan that is completely based on that principle of livability and then baking technology into that. You know, that's probably too much for some of the bigger cities because they couldn't function that way. But I think these are interesting concepts to have on board now. What we start to see, though, are the three policy areas that I think will drive it from a city's point of view. And the first one will be better services. So City Mapper in London is a good example for multimodal transport information, or my Southeastern train app. You know, these are clearly improvements in services where I no longer have to be on my platform to know that my train is delayed. Yeah? Or yesterday when I flew over, I found on the tube that the tube station I had to get off was closed, so I got off at a different station where I've never been to before in London. I took my phone on and showed me the way. I decided to walk and not get a taxi. That's just the way it is. So these service improvements will come, and they will not just come in functional areas like transport or autonomous vehicle or electrification. The service innovation will also come, I think, in a big area around social and health convergence, which increasingly some cities take responsibility for. So I don't know what the role is here in Dublin, but it's not just about functional physical stuff. It's basically where you have constraints and where the city has a role in dealing with these constraints. Education could be another one. And street lighting, I put in just an example because we've done a small piece with Jamie and his team on that, but it also shows the complexity in a way, that a street light no longer is just a street light because it could also be a sensor, you know. But who should pay for that? Not the highways department that needs health and safety, not the people who have the energy objective to do that. So who should pay for the sensor that tells you all of a sudden weather information? We as designers design. I probably shouldn't say that. Anyway, we're designing buildings right now with temperature information measured at Heathrow for the City of London. That is clearly out by a few degrees. If you take every building in London and you would close that gap, the energy and climate action impact of having much more accurate temperature data available would be hugely valuable to society. But who would want to pay for having a temperature sensor in every street? So there are questions around investment and return and scalability of solutions, and street lighting is an interesting case study for that. The second area is economic development. The tech industry in London is 700,000 employees. The only industry that didn't shrink during the recession. Highly vibrant, from one-man bands to multinationals like Google and IBM. So not to have an economic development framework for that market is crazy as far as I'm sorry. It's not advisable in my view, because what we said earlier, as long as you don't return your phones, there is more demand for businesses to do stuff with technology. And the third is the votes. And what we mean by that is not just votes in terms of using technology in electioneering and campaigning. That clearly is a big thing nowadays with targeting, messaging. I mean, that's quite awful in a way. It's quite cynical, actually, I think. But the idea that participation and engagement will be different in the future when every citizen is highly informed, highly connected with each other, when mayors or political leaders are forced to have digital manifestos where they show their vision and their role in the digital economy, will change the political landscape of cities. And that is where the problem also starts. This is a quote I found 2 days ago, I think it came out. The IET did a piece where they said 37% of people aged 18 to 34 had heard of smart cities. That is actually quite a good figure. When we started the Smart London Board and we did a survey, we found that the most hated word was smart cities, or one of the most hated words was smart cities. They said it was meaningless, it was empty, it was like to government or industry slogans that were not relevant to citizens. So there is a slight change, but just 6% of people 65 or over said the term was known to them. Yeah. And Alan Howard from the IET framed it as, in spite of substantial investment in smart cities from government, local authorities and businesses, most people don't understand the concept. Yeah? And I think that is one of the critical issues that needs to be addressed. Because if you make it strategic in your city and your citizens don't understand it, it is a problem, as far as I'm concerned, in a democracy. So closing the gap between the citizens' role and the citizens' understanding and what you want to do with the digital economy, I think, is a critical part. Now, this sounds all quite good. So I want to spend a little bit of time, make it sound a little bit less good, by going through some of the challenges and the difficulties associated with smart cities. The first is the digital city is complicated technically. So for the Information Marketplace report, where we talked about where data is created on streets and buses, on mobile networks, and it's not 5 systems, trust me. We modeled this for a project in the Middle East, 120 systems with loads of subsystems, all producing data now that is connected and to some degree accessible. And then a multitude of either service or operational efficiencies or better consumer experiences that you want to deliver with all this new digital stuff happening here in the field. And how to organize what sits in the middle is a massive technological and commercial challenge. And we think there are principles you should follow. One is, it's about reducing cost and friction of data moving from here to here, and instructions moving back from here to here. And that should happen machine integrated and searchable. You know, the Open Data Institute has done an excellent piece on that called Data Infrastructure that talks about data being open, shared, or closed, and that becoming both a policy and a technical vision. That was originally written by Tim Berners-Lee, obviously, and Nigel Shadbolt around this idea of the web of data. But that technical architecture is highly complicated. And there are companies right now selling solutions which I don't think will work or not in the interests of citizens. Equally, not investing in this will hold cities back. So this is technically a complicated space. The second challenge is something we did in London, which is mapping all the organizations that were part of the ecosystem. On the Smart London board, we were, I don't know, maybe a dozen or so institutions from business, academia, stuff. And we decided to map who else we need to talk to. 120 organizations. One of those, which I can't read on the slide, is Transport for London. Well, Transport for London operates multiple tube lines, bus franchises, with thousands of assets underneath, with dozens of companies involved. So you probably can multiply that by a factor of 10 if you want to actually capture who are the companies and stakeholders involved in the digital economy. So how do you facilitate that? What's your role as a city in getting engaged and doing something about this? It's not a trivial question. Where when we do airport expansion, it's 5, maybe. The London sewage problem project, you know, has got a big public consultation project behind it, but the key stakeholders that are involved in the decision making is quite overseeable. So the ecosystem is a real challenge. The next one is this: the technology is purchased by departments for a range of, you know, often quite specifically and narrowly defined functions. So I always say when I show the silos don't go away, you will have a transport department in most cities for years to come. And they're investing, let's say, in bus ticketing systems or in other systems as they use it, and they have an output up here in terms of operating the buses and providing a public transport service. And every silo in the city. But because of the social mobile analytics and cloud, the nature of these technologies, we could now think horizontally across that. We could think around data across all of these assets, or analytics, or value-added services across all of these assets to improve outcomes. Now, I can't see that we're going to build us out of the transport and mobility crisis that we have by just putting more roads in. You know, when I drove here today, the tram project clearly is already constraining road space, which the taxi driver wasn't impressed with. And these are highly political topics. In another city we spoke, the closure of a road to pedestrianize it and introduce cycling are real issues. So to be able to deliver that, people will need to have more real-time information to organize their mobility needs if there's less space to use to do that. That data doesn't sit in one company or with one stakeholder. So we have to be able to get across. The integration of health and social care is a huge, huge challenge. And the delivery of those services currently is completely separated with regard to data and services and how you engage with these services. So there must be at some point an ability to work across the silos. The third is that the cities actually are already spending money on technology. This is a study we did on UK city councils spend on IT, and it's not high compared to banking and finance, for example, who spend more, as a percentage of operational expenses overall, but it's not small either. So councils are already investing in IT, But the way they invested in IT is creating another silo, basically, that is called IT, and that runs the council's website, or that runs the council's call center, or the council's own side of activities. And we can't really see that figure reducing, but we think it's probably not deployed as efficient as it could be. So my final challenge is the technology and the money associated with it sits in 3 different buckets that are currently not understood by most councils. Incumbent IT spend, what we call embedded IoT or embedded technology budgets. So these are all the projects that are happening in this ecosystem that people are not aware of. And then a level of new digital money that is meant to optimize what's already being invested here. Now, the cities who get their head around that realize that is a lot less than what they invest in physical infrastructure or in other policy initiatives, and potentially a real opportunity to create better cross-city planning and policy outcomes across the city in those 3 areas of better services, jobs, and stronger representation or better political engagement. And here are some quotes from people who sort of start to think about this. So this is in Rio, Mayor Paes, who gave us the gift of polis digitocracy, which we will, on the way out, ask you all to repeat. And if you can't, there will be no tea or coffee. He was very clear that technology will change democracy in cities, and that if there's a political leader, you're not in front of that wave, you will be swept away by it. In Singapore, Singapore is very clear on 2 issues. One, it's the state which most land constraints than any of us have. You know, we all have land constraints in a way, but they generally have land constraints because their neighbors don't like them, and they haven't got space to go into. So for them, growth and efficiency are completely coupled, a bit like China for population reasons. The second one is they want to create high-value jobs. They want to be in their time zone and in their area a leader and have high-value activities, and found that digital is a key sector for them. So their entire economic development policy was always linked to digital activities. And our previous Mayor Boris, which I think we often use because of his hair, yes. Rather than of his message, that's not completely fair. But him and Ken before him both made quite big technology investments. Yeah? Congestion charge system, Oyster card, cycle hire scheme, TfL, open data policy, the London data store, the Smart London board itself. I mean, it wasn't an investment, we were all there for free. But they made big bets because they understood the connectivity between what they need to achieve, what they do. But they didn't create an explicit governance and leadership model. They had the benefit of a highly developed ecosystem in London that they could mobilize. And when I showed you my timelines in 2010, you know, these were the formative years for them as mayors too. So personally I think we could have done more in London, but we already did quite a lot, and the investment was not insignificant. But it was linked to infrastructure because of this problem of 1 million people moving into London, that as far as the Londoners are concerned that currently live there, nobody asked for. Yeah? If you're sitting on a train, on a commuter train in the morning, and you talk to the guy next to you, and you don't have to shout, you know, they're like that in your face, and you go and say, do you think we need another 1 million people? But they will come. So we will have to find things that drive efficiency in our infrastructure in London that is absolutely critical. So what is the challenge, I think, is the starting point. Cities need a city vision. They need something which is their own agenda, which is authentic and can be explained to the citizens as relevant to them. You will then already have policy instruments for social, spatial, economic, transport, housing infrastructure. But digital often is not represented at that level in the city authority, from a policy, from a leadership, from a financing point of view. So when that is the case, it's a change agenda. And I want to show you a short video that I think explains why this is so painful for some cities to deal with.
If you've learned a lot about leadership and making a movement, then let's watch a movement happen, start to finish, in under 3 minutes, and dissect some lessons. First, of course, a leader needs the guts to stand alone and look ridiculous. But what he's doing is so simple, it's almost instructional. This is key. You must be easy to follow. Now here comes the first follower with a crucial role. He publicly shows everyone else how to follow. Notice how the leader embraces him as an equal. So it's not about the leader anymore. It's about them, plural. Notice how he's calling to his friends to join in. So it takes guts to be the first follower. You stand out, you break ridicule yourself. The first follower is an underappreciated form of leadership. The first follower transforms a lone nut into a leader. If the leader is the flint, the first follower is the spark that really makes the fire. Now here's the second follower. This is a turning point. It's proof the first has done well. Now it's not a lone nut, and it's not two nuts. 3 is a crowd, and a crowd is news. A movement must be public. Make sure outsiders see more than just the leader. Everyone needs to see the followers, because new followers emulate followers, not the leader. Now here come 2 more people, then 3 more immediately. Now we've got momentum. This is the tipping point, and now we have a movement. As more people jump in, it's no longer risky. If they were on the fence before, there's no reason not to join in now. They won't stand out, they won't be ridiculed, and they will be part of the in crowd if they hurry. And over the next minute, you'll see the rest who prefer to stay part of the crowd, because eventually they'd be ridiculed for not joining. And ladies and gentlemen, that is how a movement is made. So let's recap what we've learned.
You got that, I think, the first time.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
I think when I first saw this was at an event that taught me 2 things. One was there's a lot of truth in the digital space. The second was read the bottom of your emails. I was giving a talk there about smart cities, which was facilitated by the Commonwealth organization, and the event where we then on a panel like this looking at proposals and ideas for investments in smart city initiatives. I was on a panel with 4 other industry representatives, and there was a little table on the side which was reserved for Princess Anne, who I didn't know was a patron of the event, and I didn't know was coming because it was in a sort of a polite English phraseology that I didn't understand at the bottom of my email. So I showed up in jeans and a woolly jumper and an old shirt, and these photos have gone viral in our company for my impeccable dress down with dignitaries. But the second bit, that's why they showed this video first. It wasn't my fight, what I really wanted to say. I think what the truth in this is the things for the leader to consider. The top one actually is that it is not just new and rapidly changing technology, it is most likely a domain he or she has not been trained or equipped to deal with. So most executives and mayors in cities will have a background in economics or planning or transport, maybe civil engineering, things that were associated usually with the growth of the city in the first place. And all of a sudden, they get asked to come up with a digital policy framework and blah, 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 blah. And what's the Internet of Things? And what's social mobile analytics? What's middleware? Blah, 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 1,000 questions. In their own executive body is also nobody who has got the comprehension behind closed doors to really have a discussion about what they should be doing. And that must feel scary, because becoming a leader in a domain that is both new and rapidly changing, I think is one of the biggest challenges and most uncomfortable areas to deal with. And at that point it becomes a personal risk. So we saw a lot of city leaders in the past saying, I'll watch another city first. The question is whether now the risk is flipping to the other side and not acting is becoming the bigger risk, as citizens are starting to demand new solutions and new services, and cities are feeling they might be left behind by others who have taken that plunge. And underneath that are sort of, you all have the slides, so I will not rattle through it, I'll be quite quick. We found sort of 6 areas. The first around organization, who should govern and lead the digital agenda. Second around process, how to choose projects based on need, not technology. Commercials, how to scale tech projects beyond the pilot. Supply, how to source technology. I mean, loads of cities we spoke to don't want to sign more 10-year tech outsourcing contracts with every meeting about change being a $1,000 a day variation order. So there's something around the supply of technology in this world. Economy, how to grow and manage a digital economy. Technology itself, how to build an architecture that is open and flexible. And acceptance, which is probably the biggest one, how to protect citizens' interest and harness civic power, and by that also explaining why you're doing this. You know, so in San Francisco, created a digital office with 200 staff and a 60 million budget. It was easy to explain because if all your voters work for Google and Intel and Splunk and all these companies, let's say, what, only 200? And maybe the entire city government should have a digital role. If you were at that time, 10 years ago, the mayor of Berlin, and you would have said, I'm launching a 200 people department for my digital economy, they would have been laughed out of the office. Yeah? So you have to be able to explain to your citizen why you're doing this.